Okay, as usual, well, shoot, let me check this out. Okay, as usual, in the absence of anyone to talk to, I'll just talk to my dog. How about that? We'll call this philosophy with Husky. Philahusky. Welcome to Philahusky. An excellent quote I heard once that really summarizes this book well is certainty is an absurdity. That's from Voltaire. I thought a lot about this concept of questioning things and found it appropriate to start the book with the First Amendment. So here you go. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. The First Amendment of the Constitution to the United States. I sat down and stared at the wall and thought for a really, really long time, an embarrassingly long time, about what that means, and tried to think of some common denominators within the First Amendment. And I really came up with questioning things. See, because freedom of speech isn't important because making sounds with your mouth is of any significance. Those who authored the First Amendment were not concerned with preserving the right of the people to project vibrations from their vocal cords. Likewise, freedom of expression is not important simply because we have a deep appreciation for the arts. No. The common denominator within the First Amendment is a recognition of the immense value in questioning the way things are done. Question rules, question values, question your government, question your religion. Question things not for the sake of being a contrarian and not out of complete disregard for truth. Question things rather to find truth. A society that discourages the practice of asking questions is surely on its way to destruction. At one time, I recognized that many of the large-scale problems of our own making that have emerged throughout human history were in some way connected to tribalism. Tribalism is the root of many evils. True. There are also some good things about tribalism, but it is the root of many evils. Okay, but I thought about this a little bit more, and I thought, is it the worst thing? Well, it's probably not the worst thing, because, more specifically, problems arise when we don't develop our ability to question things within the tribe. Exercising any of the rights listed in the First Amendment involves questioning the way something is done and exploring other ways. This becomes more apparent if we imagine a society that is absent of the rights listed within the First Amendment. Throughout history, there have been many national governments that have not given their citizens the freedom to choose a religion or even the freedom to choose no religion at all. At the time of this recording, countries like Russia, North Korea, Iran, China, and countless others still operate without the freedom of the press. These countries have state-run media provide the masses with one narrative, depriving citizens of the opportunity to hear multiple sides or perspectives of each story, which would allow people to form their own opinions. And of course, somebody's going to chime in and say, well, we don't have that in America either. And that's true. We do have our choice of bad in America. We still have freedom of the press. For example, I can record this and put it out into the world. Probably not many people will listen to it. That's not the government's fault. People choose to consume junk and nonsense, and so that's what they get. But as it stands in the United States, I can still buy one of these and talk into it. And not the case in many countries. In the United States, yes, it seems like the most popular views are either right or left, but two choices is better than one, which is what you got in North Korea. You got no choices at all. But yes, I do concede that in the United States, people are not free to form their own opinions. The opinions that they form are fed to them. They are programmed into them through television and even YouTube and things the government has their tentacles in. When citizens have rights like those which are preserved within our First Amendment and don't like the job their government is doing, they may say so in speech. If citizens believe that their message would be better understood or live longer expressed throughout music or another form of art, they can make that art. They can make that expression. They can make that music. In what manner do the authors of the United States Constitution imagine their people would exercise their right to make their opinions known by preserving their right to assemble. That's how. This allowed the ability to have forums available for discussion. Keep in mind, when the First Amendment was written, there was no internet, television, radio, or text messaging. Back then, physically assembling and the printing press was their Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram all rolled into one. So what would ensure that people living in the year 1787 would be permitted the ability to get their point across? The right to assemble, the right to make speeches, and the printed word were essential for this purpose. Freedom implies having choices, see? And making decisions means that you can question the legitimacy of one thing over another. Therefore, the ability to question things in a society is an exercise of freedom. Not understanding this principle is why people can be confused about the United States as being notorious for freedom, even though Americans can't just do anything they want, like drive 200 miles an hour on any public highway and play music as loud as they want, any place they want, at any time of day they want. Because these actions have the potential to encroach on someone else's freedom and miss the principles attached to freedom, primarily the freedom to choose. That's why monopolies are illegal. The freedom to choose, the freedom to change our minds, the freedom to change other people's minds. A change in belief and mindset has the greatest impact on a society. Therefore, it is the greatest exercise of freedom. It is also the greatest exercise of tyranny, seeing as many organizations know this, and so they create PSYOP campaigns, psychological operations, to manipulate you. But a change in belief and mindset has the greatest impact on a society. Therefore, it is the greatest exercise of freedom. And so, as citizens of the United States, questioning things is our first right, not by mistake. And as humans, it is our most powerful ability because questioning things is what initiates improvements. My mom, God rest her soul, dropping me off for my first day of high school, I remember saying, "I'm going to tell you something I told your brother Jeremy on his first day of high school. Ask questions." And so, not bad advice in hindsight. Although at the time, neither my mom nor I understood just how far a person could take that advice. She would never live to know that I written a series of books called Question Things and copyrighted the phrase Question Things. If I had to guess, I think she probably just meant that we should not refrain from asking a question simply because we're afraid of people's reaction to our question, right? What will people think? Oh my God. Will they think I'm stupid? In my case, probably yes. Did they already address the answer to my question, but I wasn't paying attention? Probably also yes in my case. Will the teacher not like me if I ask questions? All of these things run through our minds, and so we're afraid to ask questions. So if I had to guess, that's what my mom was getting at when she said to me, "Ask questions," while shoving me off to my first day of high school. Against her wishes, by the way, she wanted me to be homeschooled, and I kind of refused because all my friends were going to high school. But I digress. In general, fear should not be a factor in our decision-making process, and asking questions need not elicit fear. And some say there are no stupid questions. Still, for quite a while, I believed that the only stupid question a person could ask was one that they already knew the answer to. But I've kind of changed my view on that. See, there is a useful caveat here. Oftentimes, epiphanies come to us immediately as we ask a question to which we already know the answer. And in cases when the answer is obvious, all we needed was to have asked the question out loud, either to ourselves or to others, in order to have worked out the answer in our heads. But who knows how much time we would have wasted in ignorance had we not asked the stupid question audibly. Therefore, asking the stupid question was not in vain if it resulted in a learning experience. Side note here, during my time as a language teacher, we typically begin most courses with a definition of terms. In fact, many college courses begin with a definition of terms. It seems only responsible to do the same thing here. And so in the book, chapter 2 begins with defining the word karma. And it does so because many debates I listen to involve two people who unknowingly agree on certain fundamentals, but are distracted by arguing over the vocabulary. This is what we want to avoid. Additionally, throughout this book, we will try to avoid the use of technical jargon in the hopes of avoiding unnecessary distractions. This will also serve the purpose of assuming nothing on the part of the reader and forces me to explain everything. When giving a lecture, I would often paraphrase. I'd intentionally say the same thing twice, but in a different way, in order to drive home the concept for some and to provide another opportunity to understand for others. You may notice that I do the same thing when I write. As a teacher, I believed it to be my fault when students struggled to understand material I was teaching. Indeed, many times the one who's at fault for students not learning is the teacher, because it's the teacher's job to figure out how to put new information into the minds of their students, which are naturally opposed to change. Still, teachers are not always to blame. After all, it's impossible to predict the minds of all people or to address every learning style in every lesson. Not to mention, some students are in fact at fault for simply not paying attention. That was more often than not me in school. And then there are those who actively and aggressively resist change. Now, these students, or humans, I should say, which come in all different ages, shapes, and sizes and walks of life, these students are not ready to learn through any style and must be primed prior to being taught. See, whether we realize it or not, this is one of the reasons that arrogance is a problem at all. And it's why we find arrogant people to be so damn annoying. Humans have a natural tendency to appreciate the concept of learning, subconsciously viewing arrogance as a negative characteristic because it shows that a person is not ready for learning. And an unwillingness to learn makes a person frustrating to be around. And now you know why. One might ask, in addition to teachers just giving information, can they become more skilled in methods for priming student minds? The short answer is yes. In fact, priming is what we're engaging in right now. Practicing our ability to question things is essential in our ability to learn, maintain healthy communities and relationships, to innovate, and so much more. Keeping an open mind is a skill. In developing this skill, we learn that life is merely a process of sharing ideas. Life should not include criticism, choosing sides, or an effort to be right. Take on the permanent role and mindset of a learner, and you won't need to fear the embarrassment that comes with being wrong. Let me say that again. Take on the permanent role and mindset of a learner, and you won't need to fear the embarrassment that comes from being wrong. Go out into the world, have interactions with people, and have the idea that, hey, I am here to learn. Teach me. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Can you clarify? Okay, got it. That's how we really should engage the world. And that's why certainty is an absurdity, because it seems like whenever somebody is really certain about something, they just make a fool of themselves, right? All throughout history, we've had the tendency to believe that our individual ability to question things is better than it truly is. A professor by the name Robert George was said to have conducted a thought experiment with his students, which involved asking them the question, if you lived in Alabama in 1861, how many of you would be abolitionists? And of course, everyone raises their hand. But the sad truth is, if you were to ask that question to a room of people in Alabama in 1861, probably nobody would raise their hand. It isn't as though humans have changed physically. You see what I mean? And so we all like to think that we're immune to bad ideas, that we're smart enough to resist them. But the clear fact is that we are not. I am not. To understand the importance of questioning things, all one needs to do is study the horrors that emerge when people fail to fulfill their societal duty to question things. Think of the number of cults that have accrued a following and the mass suicides and sexual assaults that have taken place within them. Consider the many research studies that have been conducted to make sense of how so many people in Germany were able to go along with the narrative that was fed to them by the Nazi Party. See, the Nazi Socialist Party was not a left-wing or a right-wing radical extremist group, as we refer to them today, as we refer to neo-Nazis today. For example, now just the mere mention of the word Nazi elicits harsh feelings within us. But at one time, that was not the case. The word Nazi was relatively new to many people's ears, and the Nazi government in Germany was thought of as just the government. Many people in Germany failed to question the agendas, mandates, and restrictions on a scale large enough to prevent what was to come, as so many citizens in so many countries have done and will continue to do. We all like to think, how is it that those people could become Nazis, but we're not asking the right question. The question should probably be, how is it that I became a Nazi? Because something similar has happened to all of us. We've all been brainwashed. Here's an example. So regardless of your political affiliation, you have a political party that you probably don't like, okay? Now imagine you're the Nazi and they're the Jews. And how many times have you said of the political party you don't like, oh, those people are terrible? How many times have you hated them? How many times have you thought, we should just put them all in jail? You know, life would be so much better because they're not just wrong, they're also dangerous. They're dangerous people. Their ideologies are dangerous. We have to shut it down. We have to get physical. We have to get violent if necessary. It's really hard to imagine when it's somebody else, but yeah, it's really hard to imagine when it's us, but when it's somebody else, it seems to make sense to us. But anyway, questioning things is an indication that you are primed for learning. By questioning things, you will either reinforce existing ideas or form new ones. Either way, you win as you become more accurate, fine-tuning the skill craft of thinking, because thinking is indeed a skill that requires practice. As you become better at thinking, you'll be better at differentiating emotions from thoughts. Understand that feelings should be factored into any equation, but emotions should never cause us to overlook information and guide us to an answer. Indeed, both thinking and feeling are two important factors, but we must be able to differentiate the two. And her tail just whacked the tripod. So anyway, practice thinking in politics, religion, relationships, and in all matters in life. This book will challenge the way you were told to think. And that notion is incredibly uncomfortable for many of us. But rather than becoming upset, if we stop and think, this creates new neural pathways that make dealing with the same situation easier in the future. Practice pushing through the desire to take an easier path. See, interrupting others, slamming our fists, raising our voices, the desires we have to deal with problems using our emotions rather than sober-minded judgment are all forms of neurological laziness. Understand that aggression, frustration, and similar emotions are not us dealing with problems. That is us avoiding problems. Some emotions are just the path of least resistance. Slamming our fist on the table is not us dealing with a problem. It is the body avoiding the fatigue and discomfort it knows the mind will experience if we force ourselves to think through a situation. The process of thinking through matters is uncomfortable. The more unpracticed we are at thinking through problems, the more uncomfortable they will be. On the bright side, neuroscience has proven that the more experience we have in dealing with uncomfortable thoughts, the easier it becomes.